I'm Reverend Charlotte McGinnis, and thank you for joining me on Heart to Heart Soulful Conversations. And it's always a pleasure. Each week is diverse and different and awesome in its own way. And just up to this point, everybody has been amazing. And I know we're not going to be sorry about this evening either, because we have an amazing guest today to share with you. Her name is Jennie Scott, excuse me. And Jennie and I actually met through virtually. We've never met in person, but we met virtually on New Year's Day at the Ascension 22 seminar that I did along with Dale Hoffman and Bob Simon and Shannon and our friends Heather and Jason out in California. And she joined us there, and she's been since then in and out, joining us for different things. And I've gotten to know you only through this beautiful virtual experience, but it's still very much in my heart, and it's really great to have you here. So welcome, Jennie. Thank you for saying yes.
Thank you, Charlotte. I appreciate getting time to share what I'm passionate about today.
Yeah, well, we've got lots of exciting things to share. You have a lot of really cool things that you do, and I know that we're going to spend the majority of the time with what's close to your heart, your mental health practice, and what you've gleaned from that, and how you serve and support people in such a huge way. Definitely look forward to talking more about that, and I'm sure people will be greatly enriched by what you have to share. But I'm going to share just a little background on you. And you are a certified peer specialist and certified psychological rehabilitation practitioner in mental health. And you've also been trained as a licensed Unity teacher. You're very much, I would say, integrating your spiritual with all you do. Isn't that what we do, Jennie? The spiritual part of us just comes through in everything we do. Would you agree with that?
It's little hard to compartmentalize. My ministry helps my mental health, and my mental health helps my ministry.
Amen. That's a very good way to say it. Well, you do other cool things too. You told me you manage a property that you have in Tybee Island. You are a feng shui practitioner and interior designer, and that's very cool. And so you've got a lot of gifts that you share with the world. And I want to get to all those things in just a few minutes, but I am so impressed and thankful to you for the work that you do for the world, because you help people who have severe and persistent mental health challenges. And a lot of people with suicidal, am I saying this right? Ideation?
Yes.
Yes. And what does that mean? Suicidal ideation. I believe I know it. Tendencies, thoughts.
A lot of people, and I'll get into this in more depth, but a lot of people have thoughts of suicide. Mm-hmm. They may not act on those thoughts, mm-hmm. but it's like a black hole. Those thoughts are sucking them down into the black hole of darkness, and they may be able to brush them aside like cobwebs, but they're just in the background. Or they may have something that just pulls them so tight that they actually have to do something, to have an attempt, and there's a lot of terminology and a lot of misinformation about suicide, and a lot of silence. We got to break the silence about talking about that. And I want to kind of address that today, because that's the population I work with a lot. And let me kind of clarify, a certified peer specialist is someone who has been in recovery, and we help other people on their journey of recovery. So it's one of those things where I have had my own mental health challenges, as many in your population have in the past, and overcome them. So I'm, the perfect guide to help people who are currently having challenges and kind of see the light. So one of the populations I work with is people who are coming out of the crisis centers and still continue to struggle with suicide ideation and suicidal thoughts. They may not have a plan, they may not have intent, But part of suicide, we have the there's the rumor going around that you just did it for attention, or nobody knew, or how did, like a couple of celebrities died by suicide. It was like, how did we know? Why didn't we know? And a lot of times the signs are there. We just don't see them. Things like giving things away, things like making end of life plans. If one of the high risk populations is single men, either widowers or but some sort of single man in the over 55. That's a high risk population. They may make a will, or they may give away their prized possessions. They may stop seeing friends or come say goodbye to friends. And those are all warning signs that we don't pick up. And then the next thing is like, they're just so lonely. I just can't stand living anymore because all my friends are dying. I want to be with my friends. So those are things that you may not see as a sign, a warning sign, if you're around someone that that's that way, but all of a sudden it is a warning sign. So it's one of those things where people don't necessarily attempt suicide, and sometimes they have they don't have this planned method. I wrote a note. A lot of times it's just sort of those sudden things. But no, I didn't mean to do this. It just happened.
Right.
So it's one of those things where we look at that conversation with a lot of trepidation. People don't even like the word suicide. They don't want to talk about it. And yet it's a break the silence conversation.
Well, and
I try to break the silence every day.
Well, and you do a darn good job of it. And I think that there is such a stigma around all of these issues, mental health. I'm sure you watched last week, Vicky Spray, who's a therapist, who had her own dark night of the soul, which brought her into this work. And I'm making an assumption, you made a little bit of a mention of it, that you now are a peer counselor because you had your own dark night yourself. So what actually led what did you do before you were in this industry? You told me you've been a counselor for 7 years. What was your background before this?
Well, I was an interior designer for 25 years, and I still do interior design. I'm between houses right now, but I'm open and available. But it's one of those things where long time ago, I started, at 13, I started with depression, what ended up being bipolar disorder. I didn't get help till I was 38. And by that time, I'd lost my house, my kids, and my dignity. And I'm sitting in a group, in an outpatient, and this girl says, I get this 12-step thing. I just don't get this higher power thing. And in my heart, I screamed, how can you do this without your faith? Because it's the only thing I have left. And I said, I'm going to answer her question someday. Well, it took 20 years and a lot of healing, but getting my life back, getting my kids back, getting my dignity back, and getting my faith back. And I still thought I needed to go to seminary to be able to work in mental health. So in 2012, I chucked my interior design business. I was working for an upholsterer, one of the best in the city. And I just walked out. I didn't know where my next dollar was going to come from. I had no idea. And then 2 weeks later, I did a forgiveness exercise, and all of a sudden the phone rang, and my uncle, who I'd never gotten along with, said, I got a deal for you, a business deal for you. And it turned out to be the same amount of money as I was making the previous year. So tuition was paid for, and I went off to Unity Institute and Seminary in Kansas City.
Wow.
And did everything I could possibly do to get through my licensed UG teaching in the next few years.
Oh, I'll be darned. Wow. So what was your spiritual practice before that? Or did you just know at that point, yes, I need to do this? Or was this just a radical aha? What was it?
Well, I grew up Presbyterian, and there was a time that I started meditating. And so there was this cute little bookstore, metaphysical bookstore. And when I discovered meditation, it really kind of calmed me down. It was able to tune out all of the chatter in my head. And as the more I meditated, the more my theology shifted to new thought. And so I changed churches to Unity. Didn't think much about it, and somebody suggested Unity would be a good fit. And I was there I sung Handel's Messiah in the church choir, and I was there at Unity the next week. So there wasn't a whole lot of transition time.
Wow.
And in the middle of meditation in church service one day, I very clearly hear this voice in my ear that says, become a licensed Unity teacher. And I'm like, a licensed what? But that was how it started. And I took classes early on, but didn't concentrate on it. And later I just said, that's what I really want to do. People who love me say, your interior design job stresses you out. What would you rather do? And I said, let me finish my licensed Unity teacher. And then towards the end of graduation, I had to have 16 hours in mental health training. So I signed up for certified peer specialist training, going, okay, this will fill my requirement. Get to the training and realize that all the stuff I just learned in the past 3 years at licensed Unity teacher training was all the stuff they were teaching in this mental health training.
Oh, wow.
And then you can get a job doing this, sign me up.
Yeah.
So I became a certified peer specialist, which is, like I said, is someone who has been in recovery and walks someone else on their recovery journey. And in addition, I became a certified psychosocial rehabilitation practitioner, which is actually a higher certification. And it was like taking the mental health SAT to get the certification. It's like 8 aspects. It's case management, coping skills, cultural sensitivity, all kinds of different aspects, health and wellness. So there's a lot of training that goes in that is, I'm not an LPC or an LCSW, so I'm not really a therapist, but between those two certifications, I'm able to use my lived experience in my education to really help people in case management, in coping skills, in suicide risk follow-up calls, and those are the things I do the best.
Wow. Well, now do you work, are you in private practice or do you work for an agency? Who do you work for?
So I work for HOTLINE Rivers, which is the largest community service board in the state of Georgia. And we cover 13 counties in North Georgia. So we get a lot of state funding. Most of our people are either on state contracted services, which means they don't have insurance and the state pays for their care, or they're on Medicaid or Medicare. We don't take private insurance for adults because they can have a private provider. So a lot of people we have are people on disability, people who have Medicare or Medicaid because they're on disability, which means they have a severe and persistent mental health condition like bipolar disorder or schizophrenia or severe depression. They're not able to function and go to work and get up and, they can put their socks on, but that's about it. And some of these people are very bright and interesting people, but they're just not able to function as well as they could because they have a mental health challenge.
Wow.
So we try to guide them through with case management. I get a lot of homeless people, and mental health and homelessness is a large intersection. Or some sort of coping skills, and that shows up differently, job placement, whatever help they need. We try to not look at just their mental health, but all aspects of their life.
Yeah. Well, that was actually my next question, and it's I'm going to try and frame this because there's so many facets. I think definitely a lot of mental health issues are chemical, schizophrenia, and but also these things, and depression and suicide thoughts. Those can be triggered by life conditions, though, as well. And so, so I know that there's many facets to this. It's not just one thing, but so it's sort of a holistic approach. I would suspect is to be able to give the life skills, number one, to provide practical means for people to live a more comfortable, peaceful, happy life, and then to bring in the spiritual / religious component to it if they're open to it. And then obviously the medication is a big part of this. So, the marrying of all of this is, I think, a big part of it. And I know that people who sometimes a life event can trigger a sudden occurrence of depression in somebody, or a death of a loved one, or a tragic situation, something like that. So what are your thoughts on, and obviously some people have that chemical component that I think triggers it. By no means, it's just a part of who they are. So how do you work with those two different facets of it and figure that out?
I call it medication and meditation. To me, it goes hand in hand, and that's how it has worked for me. And so I kind of joke about that to the people I serve. There's a certain amount of, I've seen people that have hearing voices, and then I teach them how to focus on their breath, how to just do some simple mindfulness. And they're able to reduce that experience of hearing voices. The voices don't go away. It's just they find a way to focus differently. So I take my spirituality into my work on a daily basis. I may not say, I'm teaching you meditation. I may just say, focus on your breath, count your breaths if you're having a panic attack. And so they're learning that skill when they don't realize that they're learning Buddhism. I teach the middle way, which is a Buddhist principle, for anger management. And I had one young man I worked with for several years. And finally, he realized that the middle way was where he needed to be instead of pulled off one direction or another. And he really reduced his anger a lot because he was able to focus on that middle way. I saw a bunch of people who never meditated before to meditate, and they have all shown an experience that is improved in their managing of their anxiety or depression or voices or whatever. And at the same time, they're not really realizing that they're learning a spiritual tool.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think ultimately, I do have great faith, and I know that anything can be overcome through connection to source. I know that from the deepest part of my being. I also understand that there's a part of myself, I'll just speak for myself, that there's part of me that is maybe not equipped or ready for that yet. And I still may have to climb the ladder to awareness of self and true identity. And part of that path is to implement these spiritual practices. Part of that path could be, I would assume, medication or meditation, all of the above. So one thing that I suggest to people too is rather, and I'm not a mental health counselor, I'm a spiritual counselor, and I always lead people back to tune into their inner voice and follow that guidance. But sometimes the guidance for one is not maybe what would be the best for the other person. So that's why I think there's so many wonderful means available till we wake up and remember who we are in truth, which is divine, holy beings of light. And that's it. And when we get there, everything else disappears. But it is a journey, don't you think?
It is, and I have to remind my individuals that they are a divine, holy being of light. I had one lady come to me, this is the South. We're in the Bible Belt, so I have a lot of people who have a very conservative background in theology. I had one lady come to me and she said, Jennie, she said, am I going to hell because I have a mental illness? And I said, honey, you've been through hell and you can give people a tour.
Yeah, exactly. Ain't that the truth? I mean, it is. And sadly, I think the stigma is being lifted slowly but surely. But there's always been such a stigma about mental illness, and that and a fear. People are so afraid of it and keep it secret. And it's just another experience. And we have to really. How do you see us releasing this stigma about mental illness? How do you think we can remedy that?
I think part of it is making, Georgia just passed a mental health parity law. Insurance companies have to pay at the same rate for physical health and the same rate for mental health. Obama, way back in the day, had a mental health parity law that was a federal law. It's since been somewhat dismantled. So the states are going through and passing parity laws. I think that's one thing. The other thing is that primary care physicians are asking about depression and suicide during their appointments with their, the regular appointments that they do with checkups. And that's integrating a lot more mental health conversation. And also, the place we can also break the silence is in our churches. Believe it or not, the first person likely to know if someone is feeling like killing themselves is a minister. And that same minister is the least equipped to deal with it. They don't teach that in seminary.
Right. Yeah, that is a great point. Well, that could be your next calling, don't you think, to get this into the seminaries. And actually, I'm very involved with the seminary I'm in, Alliance of Divine Love, and this would be a terrific addition to our curriculum. I mean, and so useful. And I might have to talk to Vicki about that, because she's working on hopefully helping some of our people, ministers, with that, not that specific training, but definitely implement this into that. But yeah, wouldn't that be beautiful if the seminaries would embrace this and train the ministers to be ready to face this? Because you see people, I'm always, again, very cautious, when I do encounter people with these issues, that I know I'm not qualified to serve in the capacity that many of these people need. So I'm always very mindful to direct them to, which will be my next question here. So when these people are coming to us, if we're not qualified to serve, what is the best place to direct anyone with a crisis, mental health crisis?
Well, I got a couple things for you. Teach you and all your viewers a really simple tool. It's called QPR. QPR is 3 questions that anyone can do. And so you ministers will find that you can put this in your packet, and you can Google this, but it's called question, persuade, and refer. So question is, be brave enough to ask the question. Did you have any thoughts of harming yourself or wishing to die? Because if you say, do you have any thoughts of suicide? They may say no. But if you say, did you have a thought of harming yourself or wishing to die? That changes the question. Right. So be brave enough to ask the question, because a lot of people are nervous and they don't ask the question.
Right.
And then persuade the person to get help. You may not be the person to help them, but stay with them until you have a solution. Persuade them, okay, let's look up the local community service board, that we can get you into services, or here's the phone number of the therapist that we refer people out to, and they work on a sliding scale. They can help you.
Right.
And the refer is the last one.
Yeah.
So persuading them to get help is one thing. And then having that help, whatever it is, available, depending on the severity of their current situation. If they are actively, with intent and plan, contemplating harming themselves, sit with them. Don't just leave. Don't send them away. Pick up the phone and dial 988.
988.
988 is now, just like in the past month, the National Suicide Hotline.
So that's universal in the US, right? 988.
It's all across the US. Now, what happens from that 988 is, depending on your location, like in Georgia, it goes to our Georgia Crisis and Access Line. In North Carolina, it's going to go to whatever crisis line that they serve. But that one number is easy to remember. So we want everybody to make sure it's just a simple, it's like 911 for the police, but 988 is for a mental health crisis.
Wow. Yeah, that's good advice. So, and like you said, to sit there until there's some sort of solution instead of just leaving
until help arrives, because it's not the answer of calling the police and having a 1013 is not always the answer.
Right.
Because not our first responders aren't always trained in how to handle a mental health emergency. They have more experience in handling a domestic violence emergency than they do a mental health emergency.
Right.
So that may be more traumatizing to have the police come than it would be to just call 988 and have the crisis team set up something that needs to be done. And they'll give you instructions of what to do.
That's wonderful advice. Well, and again, to your point earlier that, as ministers, that's one leg of it. But like you said, the emergency care workers, the EMTs, the police officers, this is probably a much needed, not probably, it is something that should be implemented into their training in a huge way so that they're able to handle and be with these people in a way that's non-threatening and supportive.
Actually, first responders are getting that training. A
Good.
lot of mental health agencies are going in, and Highland Rivers is one of them. We go into the local police and do a first responder mental health training. And actually, here in Canton, we have a mental health response team in the police. So anytime we do have to send someone to the hospital that we have to have the police or the ambulance transport, then our officer Tommy comes and helps take care of the situation. And, we do all the paperwork and off they go. But that is a very beneficial situation that most communities don't have the resources for.
Right. Well, that's definitely where hopefully some of this seed money will be able to be planted in that arena. That would be a great blessing. Well, you had just mentioned something which really I've also this past couple of years, with COVID and people are out of sorts, they're feeling disconnected, they're lonely, they're scared. Our world is changing drastically every day. It's definitely a turbulent time for most people. I mean, I think everybody's having their own little personal crises here. And every therapist, I have several friends who are therapists and they all are booked. I mean, they all say that they have waiting lists. And so it's definitely a field, I think, that is wide open and hopefully more people will take an interest in and pursue. But you mentioned loneliness, and I think that's a pandemic. I mean, it's an epidemic. There's so many people are lonely, and it just breaks my heart. I mean, to think people go home. I was at the mall the other day. We walk at the mall when it rains, and so we don't get wet. And there's a guy there that walks, and he's 85 years old. He lives alone. He's, his life consists of eating every day at Golden Corral and then going to the mall for a walk. And he talks to anyone who'll listen, and he's sweet as can be. But I just know that there are so many people like him, and even more so, that are isolating. And loneliness, I think, is a huge problem. And I wish there was something we could do to help people in that respect.
It is, and social media is not a replacement for it. And I think you're going to find, the highest risk categories are teenage girls between 9 and 13. That sounds young, but it's
That's young. Yeah, I didn't know that.
But teenage, like middle school girls, older men, and women in their middle age, 40s and 50s.
Mhm.
Those are the demographics we see the most as far as high risk. And a lot of people in COVID, of course, they isolated more. I didn't. I never stopped working. And my case management caseload in the middle of COVID was 44, and I just was doing it all by telephone.
Wow.
And we never stopped. And we have seen a big uptick in the number of people seeking services directly related to COVID. And I think people are just getting to the point where I just can't do it anymore. And they finally come in as a resource. But a lot of people stop themselves because, I don't have insurance, or, I don't know where to go, or, I'm not that bad. Somebody else needs it more than I do.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of conversations, but yet the question I get the most often is, I have a family member with a mental health challenge. What do I do?
Mhm.
What do I do? Because, and I get this question like once a month from people I know. I get people talking to me on Facebook or emailing me or calling me, Jennie, I've got a family member with a mental health challenge. And the first thing I would do is, if they have insurance, call the number on the back of your insurance company's card,
Mhm.
because they will be glad to give you a list of providers. And of course, then you call the provider and make sure they still take that insurance. If you have Blue Cross, then say, call Blue Cross, but call the provider they give you.
Mhm.
If you don't have insurance, then Google Community Service Board in my area. Flat Rock, North Carolina. You may find that there may, I Googled earlier, community service boards near Flat Rock, North Carolina. And I came up with Thrive. Thrive, once I read the website, this sounds like perfectly like what I'm looking for.
Wow.
If you call them and they can't help you, they'll refer you to somebody who can.
Right.
So there's community service boards all over the country. And might I add that they're certified specialists, peer specialists in 38 states, even though Georgia was the first. And so there's somebody on the other end of the line who will be willing to help. Even if you may not have insurance, a lot of the community service boards will do sliding scale or something like that, so that you can afford mental health care. So don't let that stop you.
Right.
The other thing, I'm going to give you some resources, and we're going to post these on the YouTube channel, right?
Yeah. When this will be posted, this interview will be on the eternal home, as I call it, of all of these, is on YouTube. My channel is youtube.com/inspire YOUTV. And in the description part, I'm going to put all these resources, list those, plus your contact information and how people can contact you. And you said you're willing to do that, right? I don't want to just.
Well, my email, I think my email is a public domain, just about. It's been posted on several websites.
Okay.
So it's energeticspaces at AOL.com. That's my private email. We're not supposed to give out our Highland Rivers email. And then let me give you some resources. I'm going to give you Georgia Mental Health Consumer Network. Even though they're specific to Georgia, they are also a peer run, peer-driven mental health resource network. And they cover the whole state of Georgia, but they also have online resources that are just fantastic. And they're at gmhcn.org.
Okay, okay, GM.
GM, G like Georgia, M like Mary, H like hot, C like cat, and N like network, .org.
Okay.
And for you, if you have a family member who may have suicidal thoughts, but not severe, or just needs to talk to somebody, but you know, the younger ones, they like to text. And so crisis text line, you text GO to 741-741, and a trained crisis counselor will be on the other end of the line for you. And they are trained. My daughter, when she was in college, was a crisis counselor for crisis text line. They had to go through countless hours of training. And if they ever got in a conversation they couldn't handle, they handled it off to a licensed therapist.
So let me ask you this. Okay, 741-741, so I can put this up right. So what, and I don't understand like all these, so what do they do? They text that number, is that it?
They just text GO to that number.
Go to that number?
Yes. And then the conversation will start, and then they can share whatever they need to share with the crisis counselor on the other end.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. Yeah, what other resources? This is wonderful information.
Of course, we have 988.
Right.
This is the brand new National Suicide Hotline. And then for families and for people with a mental health challenge, there's the National Association of Mental Illness, or NAMI, NAMI.
Okay, is that NAMI.org or?
Yes, yes. Okay. It's a national organization, and you will find chapters in your area. They're really good for resources for families, for support groups, for how do I navigate this new thing in my life called mental health. There may be a group that's close to you that they have meetings that the families can get support or the individuals can get support. There's a lot of information. Do you need more information about bipolar disorder? You know, then that would be a website to go to. So it's just a whole bunch of different, information about mental illness and mental health. And then I would also add WebMD, which if you really need to know about, say you have bipolar disorder and you don't know anything enough about bipolar disorder, you just got this diagnosis. So you go on WebMD, search bipolar disorder, and it will tell you all the stuff in plain English you need to know about your newly diagnosed mental health challenge.
Right. I know.
It'll also tell you about your medication. Say you got on Prozac, and you have no idea anything about Prozac. So you go to WebMD, you put in Prozac, they'll tell you all there is to know, and it's in plain English. And then lastly, there is a wonderful organization called To Write Love on Her Arms. And I always tear up a little bit when I think of them. They are a national organization that promotes mental health and suicide prevention, particularly on college campuses. But they have a wonderful Facebook page. They have a wonderful blog on their website, and their website is twolha.org. So it's TWOLHA.org.
Okay, gotcha.
And the story for To Write Love on Her Arms is they had two guys in Florida had a friend, and she kept self-harming. She kept cutting. And so they went over to her house one day, and they took magic marker and wrote the word love all over her arm, so that every time she tried to cut, she would be reminded what a whole and perfect person and how much loved she was.
Wow.
And so it started from there and it grew into a national organization, and they do so much. Plus, they have some of the most awesome t-shirts. So please buy a t-shirt and support them.
Wow.
They have them on their website. Their merchandise is fantastic. And their blogs are great to read. They have, stories from people who have recovered from self-harm or suicide or things like that. And they're just really, kind of a unique community of people who have lived experience and with support and things like that. And the fact that they focus on college campuses where that's a high risk area.
Mhm.
A lot of kids that can't go with the pressure of college, I say kids, they can't go with the pressure of all the being away from home, being away from our friends that were in high school, they're having to do all this adulting by themselves and trying to make good grades and things like that. And they need that support, but they don't know where to turn. And sometimes even the college health services doesn't have the things that they need. So it's one of those things where to write love in her arms. My daughter was the president of her chapter at Kent State.
Oh, wow.
And they were very active. They did all kinds of stuff on campus.
Oh, that's beautiful. So let me make sure it's TWOLHA.
Yes.
Okay.
.org.
.org. Got it. Well, one thing that I think comes up, and I recognize this too, is the value of community and connection, and just to be able to find, obviously 12-step groups are great, these support groups, but just in general for overall well-being, to be with other people with common interest, be it nature, spiritual, a sport, what have you, but just something to engage with other beings. And you can even do that virtually, but do you feel that community and connection is a big part of healthy mental health?
I think so. A lot of people who have more support report that they're able to function better.
Mm-hmm.
But and I'm gonna be a Debbie Downer for just a minute. My individuals report to me that their family is the least supportive and that their friends are more supportive.
Yeah.
It's just sad, but I think because families get tired of having to be the one that the person calls and said, I need money, or I need a ride, or I need help, then they don't know how to help.
Right.
And they don't know to ask, how can I help you? What do you need? And they keep trying to say, get a job,
Yeah.
Snap out of it. Just get over it.
Well, and
that's a little bit difficult, but it's one of those things where I have found that New Thought spiritual communities are really helpful to people because they teach a lot of the self-responsibility and thoughts create a reality, and that you are a perfect person, and that prayer is a coping skill. And I think that our New Thought communities draw people who have maybe some depression or some sort of mental health challenge, because it's a good fit, because the stuff their therapist is trying to teach is also the stuff that they're learning on Sunday.
Right.
And it's also a New Thought community is usually not just a Sunday thing. You go to a mainstream church and you're done, you're 1 hour and done for the week. Mm-hmm. Whereas most New Thought communities have some sort of activity going almost 7 days a week.
Right, exactly. Well,
I mean, just like your group over in Flat Rock, you've got your Course in Miracles, you've got your prayer group, and you're online doing some of these things. Mm-hmm. It's the book study. I've participated in that, and I will again.
Yeah. Well, good. Yeah. Well, I think it's just all these things. Anything we can. I'm a believer with whatever our dominant energy is, whatever we're giving our key attention to, is going to be creating our reality. So the more good we can put into the heart, mind, and soul, the better we're going to feel. Good food, good friends, good books, good, anything inspiring and uplifting. And as you said, prayer is a great, I like the way you said it, a great, would you say coping tool?
Prayer is a coping skill.
Yeah, I like that. And it really is.
And so many times we say our problems are so God-sized. And it's like, no, our problems aren't God-sized. We've limited our God to be too small.
Right.
So in the words of Paul Hasselbeck, you have to take, if God is absolute power and infinite ability, then what we have to do is limit God less. And if we can limit God less, then all of our problems become smaller. Right. And that's part of the spirituality that I teach. I was like, okay, if prayer is something that you do, let's turn this over to God. Let's let it go, and let's, realize that God is bigger than this. Right. And so I think a lot of times we need to let God be bigger than our problems.
Amen to that, sister. I tell you, well, and I don't know if you've ever really studied the Course of Miracles or not, but there's one of the miracle principles. It says there is no level of difficulty in miracles. We give more power, we feed our fears rather than understand that there is this, our problems are so minuscule compared to the power of Creator God to overcome those. And when you get that, it's just, there is no level of difficulty in miracles. And I think it takes practice, and we eventually get more trust and confidence in asking for support and help from God, through prayer and reaching out to other people. But we definitely don't tap into the greatest power in the universe. And that lends me to one thing I've noticed is there seems to be in the newer generation of 20 somethings and even younger than that, a lot of them have lost their interest in pursuing anything spiritual, almost to the point, don't talk to me about it. I'm not interested. And that makes me sad, because I do know how I can't imagine a life without my connection to source and the books that I've read and people like yourself who, we lift each other up. And to think that, that this is just baloney is a sad state. And there are a lot of people. How do you lead people back to God maybe when they've lost their faith or never had it?
I think a lot of it's kind of harder, especially the millennials, and whatever millennials who were going to church. And I've noticed this in my uni congregation. I noticed this in my daughter's family. Whatever church involvement they had before COVID put a squash on it. And now COVID was the perfect excuse not to go to church. And now they've completely abandoned it. Right. And if you think about it, here's a generation who grew up with a computer in their lap, a phone in their hand from when they were in diapers. And I joke at my daughter, I said, you grew up in disposable diapers and you've been throwing away things ever since.
Right. Yeah.
So it's one of those things where I think also that generation is going very external. They're trying to achieve the American dream of their parents and grandparents. They want all the goodies, and they're looking outside of themselves. And it's not until they get older in their 30s and 40s and 50s that they start looking for that introspection inside themselves. They've looked outside and that didn't work, and now they're all of a sudden have to look at themselves and say, what do I really believe? What's going on here? But I have gotten to the point where the millennials have a completely different perspective than us older generation. We grew up with parents that fought World War II and lived through the Depression. The millennials grew up with parents who were working the entire time, both mom and dad, said, here, sit down in front of the TV and you might get something that got heated up in the microwave for dinner, you know. So that actually, that generation is all, my daughter and I were having a conversation that all of the millennial moms are staying home at being stay-at-home moms, because childcare is $500 a month, and they usually, you know, she said, I have one neighbor that spends more in childcare than they do in rent. And she said, we just, with 2 kids, we can't do childcare.
Right.
And so she loves being a stay-at-home mom.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the millennials are shifting that timeline back, and that's going to affect how the kids are raised and how the millennials communicate and create community. So it's a little different. But at the same time, I think as that population ages, they're going to be a lot more serious about their introspection. They see what doesn't work in the world, but they're not quite sure how to have a voice.
Right.
But it's coming. It's coming. And that generation also is the generation that understands that therapy is part of the journey. You know, they have the anxiety, they have the depression, they're familiar with what suicide is. Right. Because they've either lost a friend or had suicide ideation themselves. And so they're not going to be as shy about asking for help as their parents or their grandparents were.
Well, I think that you're right. A lot of these same kids are very comfortable with seeking therapy and counseling, and that's a very good thing. I think it's wonderful for everybody to have to be able to just talk it out with somebody from just a non-judgmental perspective, and someone who can just be a good listener. And so, yeah, they are seeking that out, and that's wonderful. So there are good things happening. It's and you know, I think that the meaning, people, I used to work with these kids years ago. I used to go to Manhattan every month, and there was a group of kids that were sort of in this group that I was working with. They were all Ivy League graduates, wonderful kids, smart, very. And they couldn't find their place. They couldn't get a job. They had all the means, you know, I got the education, I got the degree from this great school, and they were just sort of, they followed the what do you call it? The prescription, I guess, for success, and it didn't happen. And so I think that is sort of what we're seeing more and more now, is that the old system's not working anymore. So we're having to sort of calibrate and find a new way of being in this world. So probably my best, now that I think about what you're talking about here, what we brought up, is the millennials are going to bridge a new way of adapting and being, and that's exciting. So
the millennials led the way during COVID, because a millennial, if you have a cup of coffee and a computer and a Wi-Fi signal, they're at work no matter where they are.
Yeah, true.
Now, my son-in-law is kind of a workaholic like I am, but he takes his little laptop with his phone wherever he goes. Mm-hmm. And if he needs to troubleshoot a problem, he's there, and then he hangs up and he's back at the cookout. Yeah. And so the millennials had that going on long before COVID happened. Right. But they taught the rest of us how to do that.
True. Yeah. Well, it's, you know, this has been a very interesting and wonderful hour spent with you. And I just admire you so much for first of all, overcoming your own dark night, and then using that as a means to share your gifts in such a huge way. And you're so knowledgeable and so inspirational, and offer hope and solutions, which is, I think, what we're all seeking, is find a way to figure this crazy world out and how to be in it. So I appreciate everything you're doing so much, Jennie.
Well, thank you, Charlotte. It's good to be part of this congregation. You know, and I'm still getting to know people, even if it's online. It's kind of fun to sit in my leggings on Sunday morning and have a cup of coffee and get to do church. but it's something that I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to share about mental health. When Robin Williams died, I promised that I would break the silence wherever I could.
Well, that was, I think that hit all of our hearts. And, most recently, Naomi Judd, I mean, that was so heartbreaking as well, that she struggled so much. And yeah, but it's out there, and I don't think anyone's exempt. But the good news is there are solutions, and there is support. And I thank you for your willingness to come on and share all these great things. And I will get it posted on my YouTube page, which anyone can go to, and I'll share it on your Facebook page as well. So yeah. And so anyway, this is, and you can go to my Facebook page as well, Reverend Charlotte McGinnis, Rev Charlotte McGinnis. And my website is charlottemcginnis.com, which has everything that you'd ever want to know that's going on. And everyone's welcome to join the virtual community. We have some cool people like Jennie and lots of cool people. So it's a fun group, and all are welcome. So any closing thoughts, comments before we wind down, Jennie?
Just hold the ones you love closer, and just know that you are whole and perfect just the way you are, even with all your bumps and bruises. And it's one of those things where if you feel like you need to reach out, there's somebody who's there on the other end.
Thank you. And yes, there is. You've made that point very clear, and thank you. And thanks everybody for tuning in. And if we'd love to see you every week. Next week, another therapist, actually 3 weeks in a row, Donna Menz, great friend of mine, great therapist. She's a Buddhist, and she'll be our heart-to-heart guest next week, Wednesdays at 5. Of course, they're all archived on my YouTube channel, so you can always watch those. So, and Sunday Soulful Conversations, of course, Sunday mornings at 11:11, and all are welcome. Okay, everybody, thank you so much. Namaste. Thank you, Jennie, and peace be with everybody. Have a great evening.